Today, we are diving into a huge, and I mean huge, question. Is liberalism, the very philosophy that built so much of the modern world, on a collision course with our planet? It's a really complex relationship, and we're going to unpack it together.
So here's our game plan. First, we'll get a handle on what classical liberalism actually is. Then we'll look at how its ideas literally change the world. After that, we'll jump to today's climate crisis and frame that big conflict, freedom versus the planet. We'll explore a new way to think about freedom and wrap up by asking what liberalism's next great challenge might be. All right, first things first, what exactly is classical liberalism? We've got to get past the political labels we hear today to really understand its original, powerful core. So let's ask it straight up. What is liberalism really? It's a word that gets thrown around all the time, right? But what it meant at its birth is often lost. Let's try and close that knowledge gap. Okay, at its heart, classical liberalism is all about championing the individual. It's a philosophy built on a few key pillars: promoting individual freedom, making sure government power stays limited, protecting our civil liberties, and of course, ensuring economic freedom. It was basically designed to defend you and me from any overpowering authority. And, these ideas didn't just pop up out of thin air, not at all. They were a direct and pretty radical response to the absolute monarchies that had been running Europe for centuries. Thinkers like John Locke, with his famous Two Treatises of Government, basically launched a direct assault on that old way of thinking, and in doing so, laid the foundation for the democracies a lot of us live in today. All right, so how did these ideas jump from the pages of philosophy books into the real world? Let's look at how they became powerful enough to spark actual revolutions and totally reshape societies. This quote from John Locke, this is the bedrock. Every man has a property in his own person. This nobody has any right to but himself. The idea that you own your own life, your own work, your own liberty. That was absolutely revolutionary in a world where most people were just considered subjects of a king. And this is the crucial part. This wasn't just some abstract academic debate. This idea had power. It fueled real-world bloody revolutions. When the French revolutionaries chanted liberty, equality, brotherhood, they were basically screaming these liberal principles from the rooftops. And over time, this kind of intellectual toolkit was built by different thinkers. You had Thomas Hobbes talking about a social contract, where we agree to give up a little freedom for a lot of protection. You had Adam Smith and his invisible hand arguing the free market does a better job of running the economy than the government. And then John Stuart Mill came along with this really key distinction. Your freedom is absolute when your actions only affect you, but it can be limited when your actions start affecting others. And that idea, that our actions can affect others, well, that brings us right to our present day. Because this centuries-old philosophy is now facing an urgent and totally unprecedented test: the global environmental crisis. The scale of this challenge is just mind-boggling. Look at this number. The IPCC says that policies that get us to change our resource-heavy lifestyles, basically changing how we consume, could cut global emissions by a staggering 40 to 70% by 2050. That's a monumental shift in how we live. So this forces us to ask a really, really tough question. Is there a fundamental conflict here? Can a philosophy that was built to champion individual freedom and limited government possibly deal with a crisis that seems to demand exactly the opposite: collective action, government intervention, and massive changes to our personal lives? Okay, let's stage this fight. Let's really pinpoint where the friction happens. Freedom versus the planet. You can see the core conflict laid out right here. On one side, you've got liberalism's deepest commitments: free markets and the government not interfering with how you choose to live. But on the other side, the planet is practically screaming for state regulation and big changes to those exact lifestyles. It really feels like they're pulling in two completely opposite directions. And believe me, this isn't just a theoretical tug-of-war. The Yellow Vest movement in France is a perfect and pretty raw, real-world example. A simple hike in gas prices, done partly for climate reasons, was the spark that ignited a massive, nationwide uprising. It just goes to show how explosive this clash can be when policy hits the pavement. So, are we just stuck? Is this an impossible deadlock? Well, maybe not. This opens up a potential way out, a path to reconciliation. And it starts with rethinking what freedom really means in the 21st century. Let's explore this idea of effective freedom. The thinking here is that freedom isn't just about someone telling you no.
Your freedom can also be limited by a simple lack of resources. I mean, are you really free to live a healthy life if your water is polluted or your town is threatened by wildfires? Environmental damage can constrain your freedom just as much as any law can. And this brings us to a new way of looking at the problem, separating the means from the ends. Okay, think about it like this. The end, or your goal, is to get to work. The means, or how you do it, is by driving your car. So the big question is your freedom really violated if the means, driving your car, are restricted a bit, but you're given a great alternative, like cheap and reliable public transit, to achieve the exact same end? So if we start to adopt this new perspective, what could the future actually look like? This brings us to what might be liberalism's next great frontier. Is it going to evolve, or is it going to face extinction? Now, what's really fascinating here is that the path forward might be paved using liberalism's very own tools. Just look at the Netherlands. In the famous Urgenda case, citizens used the rule of law to successfully sue their own government for not doing enough on climate change. And get this, the court based its decision on the European Convention of Human Rights, directly linking climate change to the fundamental liberal right to life and family. But there is one giant hurdle left, and it goes right to the very core of this philosophy: anthropocentrism. That's a big word for a simple idea, that human beings are the center of everything, the most important thing in the universe. And historically, liberalism has been all about us, valuing nature mostly for what it can do for us. And that leads us to our final and kind of provocative thought. Over the centuries, liberalism has slowly expanded its moral circle, from just a small group of wealthy men to, in theory, all of humanity. So you have to wonder, is the next logical step in its evolution to expand that circle one more time, to maybe grant rights to nature itself? That might just be the ultimate test for this world-changing idea.